For 40 years, Mumm-Ra hid a secret that was sitting right in front of us. For anyone who grew up in the 80s and 90s, Mumm-Ra was simply the greatest villain in Thundercats. But what did television never tell you? Who was Mumm-Ra's real sister? Why did he condemn her to an eternal prison? And what does the dog that never left his side reveal about the man who existed before the mummy? The story begins in episode 12 of the original 1985 series. By that point, Mumm-Ra had failed to defeat the Thundercats more times than anyone could explain. A sorcerer with thousands of years of experience, thwarted again and again by a group of newcomers to Third Earth. So he did something unusual. He went looking for help. He consulted Nemesis, an ancient divine power, and asked for a strategy that would finally end the Thundercats. And Nemesis gave him a name, Ta-Shi. The animated series told us almost nothing about her. A name, a prison, a power. To bring Ta-Shi back from the time warp prison, Mumm-Ra needed 3 specific ingredients: a lock of Cheetara's hair, 1 tear from a burble, 1 shoe from a unicorn, 3 objects assembled in secret, each one a single piece of a ritual old enough to predate the Thundercats themselves. The time warp prison was not a dungeon. It was not a cage made of iron or stone or chains. It was a royal barge, drifting on an infinite sea in another dimension, outside of time itself. Ta-Shi was surrounded by attendants, dressed in silk, given every comfort that an eternity of isolation could offer, except the only thing that mattered to her: freedom. When Mumm-Ra completed the ritual and the portal opened, Ta-Shi stepped through it, like someone surfacing from the bottom of the ocean after centuries of holding their breath. And what the Thundercats saw froze them in place. She was extraordinarily beautiful, and her eyes carried the doom gaze. The doom gaze was not simple hypnosis. One look was enough to shut down the will entirely. No resistance was possible. No struggle. Lion-O, holder of the Sword of Omens, looked at Ta-Shi for 1 second and went completely still, the sword useless in his hand, the eye of Thundercats dark. He stood there as Mumm-Ra prepared to banish him into the time warp prison, and he did nothing at all. The only reason the Thundercats survived that day was Cheetara. Because the doom gaze only worked on men, Cheetara was completely immune. And while every other Thundercat was either hypnotized or occupied with the mutants, Cheetara fought alone. What followed was one of the few moments in the entire series where the outcome rested entirely on one character who was not Lion-O. She broke through the trance holding Lion-O in place, and just like that, the plan collapsed. Back to the royal barge, back to the infinite sea. The last sound she made was a cry for freedom so desperate and raw that it stays with you long after the episode ends. And that is when the Marvel UK comics revealed the question the animated series never thought to ask: who put her there? In the comics, the answer is explicit: the one who built the time warp prison, who performed the original ritual, who sentenced her to float on that barge for eternity, was not a rival sorcerer. It was not the ancient spirits of evil. It was Mumm-Ra himself. But there's a curious detail that has confused fans for decades. Years later, the series introduced Mumm-Ra, another immortal sorceress. The same pyramid, the same ancient magic, the same kind of power. To a lot of people, she seemed like the obvious answer. If Mumm-Ra had a sister, surely it was her. But there was a problem. The comics told a completely different story. Mumm-Ra's true sister was Ta-Shi. The real answer was never on television. It was hidden in the pages of a comic book that almost nobody read. He imprisoned his own sister. On the surface, it reads as a simple betrayal. But Mumm-Ra is not merciful. He has never been merciful. He has destroyed everything that stood in his way for thousands of years without hesitation. If he wanted Ta-Shi gone, she would be gone. Instead, he built her a prison that was almost comfortable, a cage made of silk and an eternal royal barge. He went to the trouble of making it livable, which raises a question the comics deliberately leave open. What did she do that forced his hand? What could a woman with the power of the Doomgaze have done that made the ever-living choose imprisonment over destruction? Something powerful enough to push him toward such an extreme decision. Maybe that's exactly why he chose to imprison her instead of destroying her. And that unanswered question is exactly where the story becomes most human. She wasn't the only prisoner in this story. After imprisoning his own sister, one thing became clear. Mumm-Ra spent the thousands of years that followed completely alone. And through all that time, only one companion remained, Ma-Mutt. Ma-Mutt was always there, at his feet, at his side, in every scene of failure, every scene of rage, every scene of defeat. Devoted in a way that nothing else in the series was. Before Mumm-Ra was Mumm-Ra, he was a man called Wahank, a high priest on Third Earth. And Wahank had a dog, a loyal, ordinary dog that slept at his feet. That dog's name was Ma-Mutt. When Wahank made his pact with the ancient spirits of evil, everything he was became something else. The man became a monster, and Ma-Mutt became Ma-Mutt. Corrupted by the same darkness, transformed by a bargain neither of them chose. But the dog stayed. Every memory of that human life was buried under thousands of years of darkness. But the dog that had belonged to a man who no longer existed was still there, millennia later, lying at the feet of a creature wrapped in ancient bandages, still loyal, still devoted. While the whole world saw only a monster, there was one creature that still saw Wahank. She slept at his feet. Ma-Mutt was not Mumm-Ra's pet. Ma-Mutt was the last living fragment of the man that Mumm-Ra used to be. Mumm-Ra was never truly free, bound to the ancient spirits of evil, Ta-Shi, bound to the time warp, Ma-Mutt, bound to the same pact that destroyed Wahank. 3 prisoners, 3 fates, 3 different shapes of darkness. That is the portrait the animated series never had the time to paint. A sorcerer who imprisoned his own sister because she was the one force powerful enough to threaten everything he had built, who kept her alive because, perhaps, he could not bring himself to truly lose her, who had spent thousands of years alone in a stone pyramid with only a corrupted dog for company, not out of cruelty, but out of something much older and much more human than that. The most feared sorcerer on Third Earth spent thousands of years trying to convince the world he was a god. But maybe his greatest secret was much simpler. He never stopped being a man. He was alone. He had always been alone. And the only one who stayed was the creature that had no choice but to love him. If this video made you see a character you thought you already knew in a whole new light, share it with someone who grew up watching Thundercats. And if you want to know the dark origin of another classic villain that TV kept hidden from you, subscribe to the channel, because the next video is about a character who seemed harmless but had a deeply disturbing past. See you then.